My parents showed up with a moving truck, not to help me move, but to force me into a tiny studio so my pregnant sister could take over my apartment. As they hauled her baby furniture into my living room, they kept saying, "It's for family. Be grateful." I tried to talk. I tried to stay calm. But when they started changing the locks, I made one phone call they weren't expecting. Can you imagine waking up one Saturday morning, only to find your entire family, parents, sister, brother-in-law, pulling into your driveway with a massive moving truck? Not to help you move, but to physically move you out of your own house. I swear, it wasn't some crazy nightmare. This was my life, and in the end, I had to call the police. 3 months ago, the early June sun was just starting to warm my living room, painting peaceful patterns across the hardwood floors. I was curled up with a book, savoring a rare moment of quiet in my home, the one I'd worked my entire life for. That peace shattered the moment I heard the roar of an engine outside, followed by another, and then another. My name is Chloe Davies, and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, I poured every ounce of my savings and years of relentless hard work into buying this house, my dream home. My relationship with my parents, Eleanor and Robert, had always been complicated. They never really hid their favoritism towards my younger sister, Sophia. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day they tried to completely erase me from my own life, from my own sanctuary. If you've ever felt like you were living in someone else's shadow, or had your boundaries absolutely trampled by the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, then this story might just hit home. Growing up in suburban Boston, I felt like a permanent understudy in Sophia's starring role. She's 5 years younger than me, and from the moment she was born, it was obvious she was the golden child. I was just there. Our house was comfortable enough. Robert was an accountant, Eleanor a teacher. We weren't rich, but we certainly weren't struggling. They could have treated us equally, but they just didn't. I still remember my 10th birthday. I got a used bicycle, paint chipping, seat worn, that Robert had fixed up. I was grateful, truly. But 5 years later, when Sophia turned 10, she got a brand new, gleaming bike, all the bells and whistles. When I dared to point out the blatant disparity, Eleanor simply said, "Sophia has always been more sensitive than you, Chloe. You understand, right?" And I did. I understood that my feelings, my needs, just didn't matter as much. High school wasn't much different. When I wanted to attend a summer science program that would look amazing on college applications, I worked evenings and weekends at the local grocery store to pay for it myself. But when Sophia wanted cheerleading camp, Robert whipped out the checkbook without a second thought. "Your sister needs these experiences to build her confidence," he'd say. "You've always been so independent." So, I became even more independent out of sheer necessity. I studied relentlessly, applied for every scholarship. I was determined to forge my own path. Senior year, I got into several great colleges, eventually choosing Boston University because of a substantial merit scholarship. Even then, I still worked part-time jobs and took out loans. Meanwhile, my parents fully funded Sophia's education at a private liberal arts college. She changed her major 3 times and took 5 years to graduate with a communications degree. I worked through every summer, graduated in 3.5 years with honors in business and marketing despite my crazy work schedule. After graduation, I landed an entry-level marketing position in Boston. The pay was tight, but it was a foot in the door. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, working insane hours. Every promotion, every raise was earned through sheer dedication. Within 5 years, I was a senior marketing manager. 3 years after that, the youngest marketing executive in the company's history. All those years, I saved. I lived below my means, invested carefully, watched my bank account grow. I had a clear goal, a place of my own, a home that no one could take away, a physical manifestation of all my hard work and sacrifice. When I was 29, I finally had enough for a down payment on a beautiful 3-bedroom house just outside the city. Hardwood floors, big windows, small backyard. The day I got the keys, I stood alone in that empty living room, and I just cried. Tears of pure joy, of overwhelming pride. This was mine, all mine. I invited my parents and Sophia to my housewarming. They came, of course, looked around with mildly impressed expressions, and Eleanor said, "It's nice, but isn't it a bit big for just one person?" That was their version of acknowledging my achievement. No congratulations, no pride, just a subtle jab, a criticism disguised as a question. Sophia, meanwhile, had met Ethan Miller in college. He came from a wealthy family, worked at his father's investment firm. They married in an extravagant ceremony that my parents contributed to generously, despite claiming they couldn't help much with my college expenses just a few years earlier. I was a bridesmaid, smiled for the photos, and genuinely tried to be happy for her, despite the obvious double standard. For the next few years, I focused on my career and making my house a true home. I renovated the kitchen, painted every room, carefully chose furniture. One bedroom became my office, another a guest room, though I rarely had overnight guests. My house was my sanctuary, the place where I could finally escape the constant comparison to my perfect sister. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. Eleanor called to invite me to Sunday dinner. Unusual, as family gatherings were usually limited to major holidays. When I arrived, Sophia and Ethan were already there, practically glowing. Before the salad was even served, they made their announcement. Sophia was pregnant with their first child. My parents were ecstatic. Eleanor cried happy tears. Robert opened an expensive bottle of champagne, sparkling cider for Sophia. The entire dinner became a celebration of the impending grandchild. I offered my congratulations, tried to share in their joy, but I couldn't help but notice how my recent promotion at work, which I'd mentioned earlier, was completely forgotten in the excitement. What I didn't know then was that this pregnancy announcement would set in motion a series of events that would test my boundaries, my patience, and ultimately, my relationship with my entire family. A week later, Robert called. "Chloe," he asked way too casually, "how many bedrooms do you have in that house of yours again?" "3," I replied, not thinking much of it. "My bedroom, my office, and a guest room." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just wondering," he said vaguely. "Your mother and I were talking about how much space you have all to yourself." The comment struck me as odd, but I brushed it off. Little did I know, it was the first whisper of the storm. A few days later, Eleanor called. Ethan had been laid off from his father's firm. "Terrible timing with the baby on the way," she lamented. "They're really worried about their financial situation." I expressed sympathy, but pointed out Ethan came from a wealthy family and Sophia had been working as a social media manager. Surely they weren't destitute. "Well," Eleanor said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "they've been living beyond their means for a while. That luxury apartment costs a fortune, and they have quite a bit of credit card debt." This was news to me. Sophia and Ethan always projected an image of effortless financial success. Designer clothes, frequent vacations, lavish lifestyle. A pang of annoyance hit me. They'd been living extravagantly while I'd been carefully saving, making responsible choices. But I kept those thoughts to myself. The calls about Sophia's situation became more frequent. Each conversation seemed to include some mention of my extra space, or how lucky I was to have so much room. I started to suspect where this was headed, but I desperately hoped I was wrong. Then came the first direct suggestion, delivered by Robert during one of his calls. "You know, Chloe, Sophia, and Ethan are really struggling to figure out their living situation. That guest room of yours would make a perfect nursery." I took a deep, steadying breath. "Dad, are you suggesting Sophia and Ethan move in my house?" "Well, it would only be temporary," he quickly added, "just until they get back on their feet. It makes sense, doesn't it? You have all that extra space, and they need help right now." "I use that space," I pointed out. "My guest room is for friends, and I need my office to work from home." "But you could convert your office back to a bedroom for yourself," he suggested, as if this was the most reasonable solution on earth, "and let them have your master bedroom." He finished with a saccharine, "Family helps family, Chloe." I ended that call, feeling completely unsettled. I immediately called my best friend, Sarah. We'd been friends since college, and she was one of the few people who truly understood my family dynamics. "They're actually expecting you to give up your master bedroom for your sister?" Sarah was incredulous. "In your own house? The one you paid for yourself?" Apparently, I sighed. And from the way Dad was talking, It wouldn't be short-term either. You need to shut this down immediately, Sarah advised, her voice firm. Otherwise, they'll be living with you indefinitely, and you'll never get your space back. I knew she was right, but confrontation had never been my strong suit, especially with my family. Years of being the understanding, independent daughter had conditioned me to avoid rocking the boat. Still, this was my home, my sanctuary, the home I had worked so hard to obtain. The next time Eleanor called with another thinly veiled hint about my selfish use of space, I finally spoke up. Mom, I need to be clear about something. I'm sympathetic to Sophia and Ethan's situation, but I'm not comfortable with them moving into my house. A long, chilling pause. I see, Eleanor finally said, her voice dropping to an icy tone. So, you won't help your own sister when she's pregnant and in need? That's not what I said, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm happy to help in other ways, but having them move in with me isn't the right solution. I never thought you would be so selfish, she snapped. Your sister would do it for you in a heartbeat. The conversation spiraled downhill from there, Eleanor laying on the guilt thick. By the time we hung up, I felt awful but still determined to stand my ground. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I had every right to maintain my boundaries. Despite my clear refusal, Sophia began dropping by more frequently in the weeks that followed. Each visit included a tour where she'd comment on how perfect the guest room would be as a nursery, or how much she loved the natural light in my master bedroom. It was as if my objections had never been voiced. During one particularly uncomfortable visit, Sophia wandered into my home office. This room has such good energy. I can totally picture setting up a changing table right here where your desk is. Sophia, I said firmly, my patience wearing thin. I've already told Mom and Dad that you and Ethan can't move in here. I need my space, and this is my home. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, a manipulation tactic she perfected since childhood. I can't believe you're being like this. I'm pregnant, Chloe. Don't you care about your niece or nephew at all? Of course I care, I replied. But caring doesn't mean I have to give up my home. She left in a huff that day, and within the hour, I received furious texts from both my parents accusing me of making their pregnant daughter cry. The pressure was mounting, but I remained resolute. Little did I know, my family wasn't taking no for an answer. They were just changing tactics. It was a Saturday morning in early June when everything came to a head. I was enjoying a rare, peaceful weekend, catching up on some reading and planning to do some gardening later. Around 10 a.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 delivery men on my porch next to a large box. Delivery for Davies, one announced, consulting his clipboard. We've got a crib and changing table to be delivered and assembled. I stared in confusion. There must be some mistake. I didn't order any baby furniture. He checked his paperwork. This is 147 Maple Street, right? Delivery for Davies. Yes, that's my address, and I'm Chloe Davies, but I didn't order this. He shifted the clipboard towards me, and I saw the order form. The purchaser was listed as Sophia Miller, but the delivery address was undeniably mine. The realization hit me like a bucket of cold water. Sophia had ordered baby furniture to my house without my knowledge or consent. I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding, I told the delivery men. Please take this back. It wasn't authorized. They looked uncomfortable, but agreed to return the items to their truck. As they loaded the crib, my hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and called the delivery company's customer service number. After navigating automated menus, I finally reached a representative who confirmed the order had indeed been placed by Sophia Miller 3 weeks ago, with explicit instructions for delivery to my address. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate attempt to force my hand. Sophia expected that once it was delivered, I would have no choice but to accept the situation. I immediately tried calling Sophia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Same with my parents. None of them picked up, which only confirmed my suspicion. This was a coordinated plan. As I paced my living room, trying to decide what to do, I received a text from Eleanor. We'll be stopping by around noon today. We have something important to discuss. I replied immediately. Did you know Sophia ordered baby furniture to be delivered to my house today? No response. By noon, I was a bundle of raw nerves, alternating between anxiety and white-hot anger. When I heard vehicles pulling into my driveway, I looked out the window and froze in disbelief. My parents had arrived in a massive commercial moving truck. Behind them, Ethan's SUV pulled up with him and Sophia inside. I stepped onto my porch, arms crossed, as Eleanor and Robert got out of the truck. "What is going on?" I demanded. Eleanor approached with a bright, artificial smile. "Surprise. We're here to help you move." "Move?" I repeated, not sure I'd heard correctly. "Move where?" "Well, your father and I have been thinking," she said, as if explaining something to a child. "Since Sophia and Ethan need more space with the baby coming, and you have this big house all to yourself, we found you a lovely studio apartment closer to your office. It's perfect for a single person like you." I stood there utterly stunned. They weren't just suggesting Sophia and Ethan move in with me anymore. They were planning to move me out of my own house entirely. The audacity was breathtaking. "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. "It makes perfect sense," Robert chimed in, opening the back of the moving truck to reveal stacks of empty boxes. "The apartment is furnished, so you only need to bring your personal belongings. We'll help you pack today and get you settled in by tonight. And then we can start setting up the nursery," Sophia added, waddling up the driveway with a hand on her slightly rounded belly, barely showing at 4 months pregnant. "I already have so many ideas for how to decorate. This is my house," I shouted, my voice rising with each word. "I bought it with my money. You can't just decide to move me out." "Don't be so selfish, Chloe," Eleanor scolded. "Your sister needs a proper home for her baby. You don't need all this space." "It's not about what I need," I shot back. "It's about what's mine. I worked hard for this house. I saved for years while Sophia and Ethan spent money like water. Their poor financial decisions are not my problem to solve." "Family helps family," Robert said sternly, as if that explained and justified everything. "Sophia would do the same for you." "No, she wouldn't," I retorted. "And even if she would, that doesn't give you the right to make decisions about my home without my consent." My protest fell on deaf ears. Robert started unloading boxes, and Eleanor brushed past me into the house as if she owned the place. Sophia followed, already talking about paint colors for the nursery, my guest room. I stood in my own driveway, watching in disbelief as my family invaded my home, preparing to pack up my life and relocate me to a lovely studio apartment I had never seen or agreed to. The betrayal cut deep, but also ignited something in me, a determination to stand my ground that I had never felt so strongly before. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about respect, boundaries, and my right to the life I had built for myself. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even my own family. I followed my parents and Sophia into my house, my shock quickly transforming into white-hot anger. Eleanor was already opening kitchen cabinets, commenting on which dishes I should take and which could stay for Sophia. Robert had set up several empty boxes in the living room and was wrapping my framed photographs in newspaper. "Stop," I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "Stop this right now. You have no right to touch my things." "Don't be dramatic, Chloe," Eleanor said dismissively. "We're helping you. The sooner we get you moved, the sooner everyone can settle in." "I am not moving," I stated as firmly as I could. "This is my house. I did not agree to this plan, and I want you all to leave now." Ethan had entered the house by this point, carrying some kind of baby furniture catalog. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, hovering near the door while the rest of my family continued their invasion. "Honey," Robert said in that patronizing tone he'd used throughout my childhood, "we've already put down the deposit on the studio apartment. It's a great deal, and it's much more suitable for your lifestyle." "My lifestyle?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean my lifestyle as a successful marketing executive who can afford a 3-bedroom house on her own? That lifestyle?" "You know what we mean," Eleanor interjected. "You're single. You work long hours. You hardly need all this space. Sophia and Ethan are starting a family. They need a proper home. Then they should buy one," I exclaimed, just like I did. Sophia stepped forward, her hand protectively on her small baby bump. We can't afford to buy right now, Chloe. Not with Ethan between jobs and the baby coming. Why can't you understand that we need help? I understand that you need help, I said, trying to keep my voice level. What I don't understand is why you think that entitles you to my house. A house that I saved for years to buy. A house that I pay the mortgage on. A house that is legally mine. Because we're family. Eleanor said, as if that explained everything. And in this family, we help each other. Help each other? I laughed bitterly. When have you ever helped me? When have any of you ever put my needs first? I worked my way through college while you paid Sophia's full tuition. I saved for years to buy this house while you gave Sophia and Ethan a lavish wedding. And now you want to take away the one thing I've worked hardest for. Eleanor gasped as if I'd slapped her. How dare you? We've always supported you. No, you haven't, I said, years of pin-up resentment finally spilling out. You've always favored Sophia, always. And now you're trying to take my house from me to give to her, just like you've given her everything else. Through the front window, I could see my neighbors, the Parkers, an elderly couple who had always been kind, standing on their porch with concerned expressions. I realized we were creating quite a scene, but I was beyond caring about appearances at this point. We're not taking anything, Robert insisted, though his actions, wrapping my possessions in newspaper, contradicted his words. We're just helping both our daughters. Sophia needs a house, and you need to downsize. I don't need to downsize, I countered. I love my house. I love having an office where I can work from home. I love having a guest room for when friends visit. I love my garden and my kitchen and every single thing about this place. And it's mine. During our argument, Ethan had been unusually quiet, shuffling uncomfortably near the door. Now he finally spoke up, though his voice was hesitant. Maybe we should have discussed this with Chloe first. Eleanor shot him a withering look. Don't you start, too. This is family business. Yes, it is family business, I agreed. And in a healthy family, you would have respected my boundaries and asked for my input instead of planning all this behind my back. Sophia began to cry. Big, theatrical sobs that had always worked to get her way in the past. I just want a nice home for my baby, she wailed. Why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel, I said firmly. I'm setting a boundary. This is my house, and I'm not giving it up. If you need help finding a place to live, I'm willing to help you look. I'll even help with the security deposit on a rental, but you're not moving in here, and I am certainly not moving out. Robert had continued packing during our argument, ignoring my objections entirely. Now he picked up a box of my books and started carrying it toward the door. Put that down, I demanded, stepping in front of him to block his path. Chloe, don't be difficult, he said. We found you a perfectly nice apartment. You're being selfish. I'm being selfish. I was practically shouting now. For wanting to keep my own house? The house that I bought with my own money. The house that has my name and only my name on the deed and mortgage. Eleanor had moved on to my bedroom, where I could hear drawers being opened and closed. I rushed upstairs to find her going through my clothes, sorting them into piles on my bed. Get out of my room, I ordered, my patience completely gone. Get out of my room. Get out of my house, all of you. No, we're trying to help you. Eleanor insisted, continuing to fold my clothes as if I hadn't spoken. I don't want your help, I said through gritted teeth. I want you to respect my decision and leave my home. Downstairs, I could hear more movement. Looking out my bedroom window, I saw Robert carrying another box to the moving truck. Sophia was in the yard, pointing to areas where she apparently planned to plant a garden of her own, while Ethan stood by, nodding along. It was surreal. Despite my explicit refusal, my family was proceeding with their plan as if my opinion didn't matter at all. As if my ownership of the house was just a technicality that could be overridden by their desires. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself enough to think clearly. Reasoning with them clearly wasn't working. They were so convinced of their righteousness, so accustomed to prioritizing Sophia's needs over mine, that they couldn't even see how wrong their actions were. I found you the perfect studio apartment near your office, Robert announced when I came back downstairs. It's small but efficient. Everything you need is within walking distance. I don't want a studio apartment, I said for what felt like the 100th time. I'm not moving. Don't be stubborn, Eleanor chided. The apartment is already paid for. First month's rent and security deposit. It's a done deal. You paid for an apartment without even asking me. I was incredulous. Without even showing it to me. We knew you'd like it, Robert said confidently. It's in a nice building with security and a gym. I don't care if it has a solid gold toilet. I snapped. I'm not moving there or anywhere else. This is my house, and I'm staying right here. As we argued, more of my belongings were being packed up and carried out to the truck. My family was literally moving me out of my own home against my will, acting as if they had every right to do so. The violation was breathtaking. The confrontation had been going on for over an hour, with my repeated demands for them to leave being completely ignored. It was clear they had no intention of stopping. No matter what I said, they were going to keep packing my things, keep planning my relocation, keep taking over my home until they had accomplished their goal. And in that moment, I realized I had only one option left. I took out my cell phone and walked to a quiet corner of my kitchen. My hand was shaking as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher answered. I took a deep breath. I need police assistance. My family is trying to move me out of my house without my permission. They're packing up my belongings and refusing to leave when asked. Are you in any immediate danger? The dispatcher asked. No, I'm not in physical danger, I clarified. But they're essentially trying to steal my house and possessions. I repeatedly asked them to stop and leave, but they're ignoring me. The dispatcher took my information, name, address, a brief summary of the situation. She assured me officers would be dispatched shortly and advised me to avoid escalating the confrontation while waiting. When I returned to the living room, Eleanor noticed the phone in my hand. Who are you calling? She asked suspiciously. The police, I answered truthfully. I've asked you multiple times to leave my house, and you've refused. You're trespassing and attempting to remove my property without my consent. There was a moment of shocked silence. Then everyone started talking at once. You call the police on your own family? Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she might faint. You can't be serious. Robert sputtered, his face reddening with anger. Sophia burst into tears again, louder this time. How could you do this to me? I'm pregnant. Even Ethan looked alarmed. Chloe, think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. You've left me no choice. I made it clear that I don't consent to any of this, and you've ignored me. What you're doing is wrong, and it's illegal. We're your parents. Robert shouted. We're trying to help. No, you're not, I replied, feeling oddly calm now that I had taken action. You're trying to take something that belongs to me and give it to Sophia. That's not help. That's theft. It's not theft when it's family. Eleanor insisted, though she had stopped packing and was wringing her hands nervously. That's not how the law works, I said. This house is legally mine. Only my name is on the deed and mortgage. You have no right to be here if I ask you to leave, and you certainly have no right to pack up my belongings. The next 15 minutes were tense. My parents huddled together, whispering furiously. Sophia continued to cry, occasionally shooting accusatory glances as if I were the villain in this scenario. Ethan paced by the window, clearly uncomfortable. I stood my ground, waiting. A strange calm had settled over me. For years, my entire life really, I had allowed my family to treat me as less important than Sophia. I had accepted their favoritism, their dismissal of my needs and achievements, their expectation that I would always give way to my sister's desires. But not this time. This time, I was fighting for something that was rightfully mine, something I had earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. Finally, we heard the sound of car doors closing outside. Through the window, I could see 2 police officers approaching my front door. I want to let them in. Good afternoon, ma'am, the female officer said. Her name tag read Madison. We received a call about a disturbance at this address. Yes, I called. I confirmed. These are my parents, my sister, and her husband. They showed up today with a moving truck planning to move me out of my house without my consent. I've repeatedly asked them to leave, but they've refused. Officer Madison and her partner, Officer Reynolds, stepped into my living room, taking in the scene. The half-packed boxes, my family's tense expressions, the moving truck visible through the window. "Is this your residence?" Officer Madison asked me. "Yes," I confirmed. "I'm the sole owner. I purchased it 3 years ago, and I'm the only one on the deed and mortgage." "That's true," Robert reluctantly admitted when. Officer Madison looked to him for confirmation. "But we're her parents, and we're just trying to help our daughters." Officer Madison's expression remained professional but stern. "Sir, regardless of your relationship, you can't move someone out of their own home without their consent. If the homeowner has asked you to leave, you need to comply. But we've already paid for an apartment for Chloe." Eleanor protested. "And Sophia needs this house for her baby." "Ma'am, that doesn't change the legal situation," Officer Reynolds explained patiently. "Your daughter owns this house. Only she can decide who lives here and what happens to her possessions." "This is ridiculous," Robert muttered. "We're family. The police shouldn't be involved in family matters. When those family matters involve potential trespassing and unauthorized removal of property, then yes, we do get involved," Officer Madison replied firmly. She turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated. As furious and violated as I felt, I wasn't sure I wanted to escalate the situation to that level. "Not at this time," I said finally. "I just want them to leave and take the moving truck with them." Officer Madison nodded. "In that case, I need to ask all of you to vacate the premises immediately," she told my family. "Any items that have already been moved to the truck need to be returned to the house." "This is outrageous," Eleanor sputtered. "Being a parent doesn't give you the right to override property laws," Officer Reynolds stated simply. Sophia, who had been crying quietly throughout the exchange, suddenly stepped forward. "You're choosing a house over your own sister," she demanded, her voice shrill. "Over your niece or nephew. How can you be so heartless?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I had never fully acknowledged before. A person who had been taught her entire life that her needs and wants came before everyone else's. In that moment, I felt a complex mix of anger and pity. "I'm not choosing a house over you, Sophia," I said calmly. "I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to value my own hard work and to stand up for what's rightfully mine. There are plenty of other solutions to your housing problem that don't involve taking my home away from me." "But it would be so much easier this way," she insisted, genuinely not understanding why I was refusing. "Easier for you," I pointed out. "Not for me." The officers supervised as my parents reluctantly returned the boxes they had already loaded onto the truck. Robert was seething, barely containing his anger as he brought each box back into the house. Eleanor alternated between tears and indignant huffing. Sophia refused to help, sitting on my couch with her arms crossed over her baby bump, the picture of wounded innocence. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor turned to me with a look of profound disappointment. "I never thought you would do something like this," she said, "calling the police on your own family. What kind of person does that?" "The kind who respects herself enough to set boundaries," I replied. "I'm sorry it came to this, but you gave me no choice." "There are always choices," Robert said coldly, "and you've made yours very clear today." With that parting shot, they finally left. The moving truck pulled out of my driveway, followed by Ethan's SUV with Sophia inside, neither of them looking back. The officers waited until they were gone. "Are you going to be okay?" Officer Madison asked, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Yes," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. "Thank you for your help. You might want to consider changing your locks," Officer Reynolds suggested, just as a precaution. After they left, I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the aftermath of the confrontation. The house felt eerily quiet after the chaos of the past few hours. I should have felt relieved that they were gone, that I had successfully defended my home. Instead, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness, anger, and a profound sense of loss. Not for the first time, I wondered why my family couldn't love both their daughters equally. Why Sophia's needs always had to come at my expense. Why they couldn't be proud of what I had accomplished instead of seeing my success as a resource to be exploited for my sister's benefit. But for the first time, I had stood up for myself in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss. I had drawn a line and enforced it, even when it was painful to do so. And despite the emotional turmoil, there was a small spark of pride in that accomplishment. I began unpacking the boxes, reclaiming my possessions and my space. This was my home, mine, and I had fought for it. The immediate hours after my family left were surreal. I moved through my house in a daze, putting back the items they had packed, erasing the evidence of their attempted takeover. With each book returned to its shelf, each framed photo placed back on the wall, I reclaimed my space bit by bit. When everything was back in order, I sank onto my couch, emotionally exhausted. The house was quiet, too quiet. The silence seemed to emphasize the enormity of what had just happened, the irreversible line I had crossed by calling the police on my own family. I followed Officer Reynolds' advice and called a locksmith, who arrived within the hour to change all the locks. It was an expense I hadn't planned for, but the peace of mind was worth it. As the locksmith worked, I couldn't help but reflect on how it had come to this, needing to literally lock my family out of my home. Once I was alone again, the emotional dam broke. I curled up on my couch and sobbed. For the family I wished I had, for the years of unequal treatment, for the shocking betrayal I had just experienced, and for the uncertain future of my family relationships. It was a purging of grief and anger that left me feeling hollow, but somehow clearer. The aftermath was swift and widespread. My phone began buzzing with text messages and calls almost immediately. My parents had wasted no time in sharing their version of events with the extended family. A version that painted me as the villain who had called the police on my pregnant sister and elderly parents for no reason. Aunt Carol, how could you be so cruel to your sister in her condition? Uncle Brian, your parents raised you better than this. Cousin Jessica, I can't believe you would choose a house over family. Message after message rolled in, each one more accusatory than the last. None of them asked for my side of the story. None of them questioned why my parents had shown up with a moving truck in the first place. In their eyes, I was clearly the one at fault. I shut off my phone, unable to deal with the barrage of judgment. The next morning, I awoke to find that Sophia had taken the conflict public. She had posted a lengthy, tear-jerking account on social media about how her heartless sister had called the police on a pregnant woman and was denying her innocent unborn child a proper home. The post was garnering hundreds of sympathetic comments and shares. I felt sick reading it, seeing how skillfully she had twisted the narrative. There was no mention of the moving truck, no acknowledgement that they had tried to force me out of my own home. In her version, I was simply refusing to share my extra space with my struggling sister out of pure selfishness. The comments were worse. What kind of monster calls the police on their pregnant sister? Family should always come first. Some people are just too selfish to understand what really matters in life. I closed the app, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. The public shaming was a new low, even for Sophia. Amidst the flood of condemnation, there were a few voices of support. Sarah called me as soon as she saw Sophia's post. "This is absolutely insane," she fumed. "They tried to literally steal your house. And somehow you're the bad guy. I'm coming over." An hour later, Sarah arrived with another friend, David, who had been part of our friend group since college. They brought food, wine, and most importantly, unwavering support. "I've already commented on Sophia's post with what actually happened," David informed me. "It probably won't change many minds, but at least the truth is out there." "You shouldn't have to defend yourself at all," Sarah insisted. "What they did was so far beyond acceptable that I can't even wrap my head around it." Their presence was a balm to my raw emotions. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt less alone, less like I was losing my mind for thinking my family's actions were wrong. "I can't believe they actually expected you to move to a studio apartment so Sophia could have your house," David said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Who does that?" "My family, apparently," I replied with a bitter laugh. "They've always favored Sophia, but this was next level, even for them." "You did the right thing by calling the police," Sarah assured me. "They left you no choice." The support of my friends strengthened my resolve, but the situation continued to escalate. The following day, I received an email from my parents' email address, but clearly written by Robert. It contained a detailed list of every expense they claimed to have ever incurred on my behalf, from hospital costs for your birth to gas money driving you to college. The email ended with, "Since you've made it clear that family obligations mean nothing to you, we expect repayment of the above amounts." I stared at the email in disbelief. They were invoicing me for being born and raised. It was so absurd that it would have been laughable if it weren't so hurtful. The harassment didn't stop there. My parents began calling my workplace, trying to reach me when I wouldn't answer their calls on my personal phone. My boss, Michelle, called me into her office after the third such call. "Chloe, is everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Your parents seem quite upset about something." I felt mortified that my family drama had spilled over into my professional life. "I'm so sorry they've been bothering you," I said. "We're having a personal disagreement, and they're not respecting my boundaries." Michelle was understanding, but I could tell she was concerned about the potential disruption. I made the difficult decision to take a week of emergency leave to deal with the situation and protect my professional reputation. During that week, after consulting with Sarah, who had a cousin who was a lawyer, I took the painful step of sending a cease and desist letter to my parents and Sophia. The letter, drafted by Sarah's cousin Kevin, formally requested that they stop contacting my workplace, cease making defamatory posts about me on social media, and refrain from coming to my home without explicit invitation. "You don't need a restraining order at this point," Kevin advised. "But the cease and desist letter establishes a paper trail if things escalate further. It shows that you formally asked them to stop the harassment." Sending that letter was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family, but it was also necessary for my own well-being and security. The letter had the desired effect of reducing the immediate harassment, but it also deepened the rift. My parents responded through their own lawyer, maintaining that they had done nothing wrong and that I was the one being unreasonable. Sophia's social media posts became more veiled in their references to me, but the damage to my reputation among our extended family and mutual acquaintances was already done. As the weeks passed, I began the process of healing from the betrayal. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Hayes, who specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. Our sessions helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships for years. "What you're describing is a classic golden child/scapegoat dynamic," Dr. Hayes explained during one session. "Your sister was cast as the golden child who could do no wrong, while you were expected to be self-sufficient and to sacrifice for her benefit. But why?" I asked the question that had haunted me my entire life. "Why couldn't they love us both equally?" "That's a complex question," she replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes it's because one child reminds a parent of themselves or someone they love or hate. Sometimes it's because one child's personality or needs fit better with what the parent is comfortable providing. But regardless of the reason, it was never about your worth as a person or a daughter. It was about their limitations, not yours." Those words were a revelation to me. For the first time, I began to see that the unequal treatment wasn't because Sophia was somehow better or more lovable than me. It was because of dynamics that had been set in motion long before either of us was old enough to understand or influence them. Work became a sanctuary during this difficult period. I threw myself into new projects, finding solace in the recognition and respect I received in my professional life. My colleagues valued my contributions, appreciated my expertise, and treated me as an equal. All things I had never consistently experienced in my family. One unexpected outcome of the whole ordeal was the strengthening of my chosen family. The friends who had stood by me, without question, Sarah and David, along with a few other close friends, became my unwavering support system. We had weekly dinner gatherings, helped each other with home projects, celebrated achievements, and provided shoulders to cry on when needed. "You know, we're more family than many blood relatives I know," David commented during one such gathering as we sat around my dining room, table sharing a meal. "Chosen family," Sarah agreed, raising her glass in a toast. "The people who love you for who you are, not what they can get from you." That concept, chosen family, became increasingly important to me as I navigated my new reality. I might have lost the family I was born into, at least in the way I'd always hoped we could be, but I was building something perhaps more valuable. Relationships based on mutual respect, genuine care, and unconditional support. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a text message from Ethan, my sister's husband. It was the first direct communication I'd had from any family member since the cease and desist letter. Chloe, I want to apologize for my part in what happened. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't speak up enough. Sophia had the baby yesterday. A girl, Willow. I understand if you don't want any contact, but I thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time, conflicted emotions swirling within me. I had a niece now, a tiny innocent person who had nothing to do with the rift between me and her parents. After careful consideration, I replied, "Thank you for letting me know and for the apology. Congratulations on your daughter. I need time, but I don't want to close the door forever." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement that life would go on, that relationships might evolve and change, and that perhaps someday there could be healing, even if things would never be the same. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was walking it on my own terms, with my boundaries intact and my sense of self-worth no longer dependent on my family validation. It was both terrifying and liberating. A new chapter in a story that was finally truly mine to write. 6 months have passed since the day my parents showed up with a moving truck to relocate me from my own home. 6 months of rebuilding, reflecting, and reclaiming my life on my terms. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. The immediate aftermath was the hardest. There were days when I questioned everything, whether I had overreacted, whether I should have just given in to keep the peace, whether the cost of standing up for myself was too high. Dr. Hayes, my therapist, helped me work through those doubts. "Chloe, what would you tell a friend who experienced what you did?" she asked during one particularly difficult session when I was second-guessing my decisions. I tell her she had every right to protect her home and set boundaries, I admitted. Then, "Why don't you deserve the same compassion you'd show a friend?" That question hit home. Throughout my life, I had been conditioned to put my needs last, especially when they conflicted with Sophia's. Breaking that pattern wasn't just about one incident with a moving truck. It was about recognizing my inherent worth and right to equal consideration. The professional fallout was easier to manage than I had feared. After my week of emergency leave, I returned to work with boundaries in place. My boss, Michelle, was supportive once I explained the situation. "Family dynamics can be complicated," she said understandingly. "But your work has always been exceptional, and that's what matters here." 3 months after the incident, I was offered a promotion to creative director, a position I had been working toward for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family relationship was in tatters, my career was flourishing. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, which I used partly to bolster my savings and partly to make some long-desired improvements to my home. My home, the physical space that had become the battleground for my independence, took on new significance in the healing process. I repainted every room, choosing colors that reflected my personality rather than playing it safe with neutral tones. I replaced the furniture in the guest room, erasing the memory of Sophia planning to turn it into a nursery. I planted a garden in the backyard, nurturing new growth in a literal and metaphorical sense. Each change was an act of reclamation, a statement that this space was mine, a reflection of my identity and choices. What had once been just a house, albeit one I was proud to have earned, became a true sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my boundaries and self-respect. The relationship with my extended family remained complicated. Some relatives, particularly from Eleanor's side, continued to view me as the villain. Others, after hearing both sides, took a more neutral stance. My father's brother, Uncle George, surprised me by reaching out about 3 months after the incident. "I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did," he said during our phone call. "Your dad and I grew up with parents who always favored him. I know how much that hurts, and I'm sorry you're experiencing the same pattern." That conversation was healing in a way I hadn't expected. Uncle George's acknowledgement that the favoritism was real, not just my perception, validated feelings I had carried since childhood. It also helped me understand that the pattern went back generations. Robert had been the golden child in his family, just as Sophia was in ours. As for my immediate family, the relationship remained strained, but was slowly evolving. Ethan continued to send occasional updates about baby Willow, always respectful of my boundaries and never pushing for reconciliation before I was ready. My parents maintained their distance, though Eleanor sent a birthday card with a brief, somewhat stilted note. Sophia remained the most distant, her pride apparently still wounded by my refusal to sacrifice my home for her benefit. I did eventually meet my niece, Willow, when she was 4 months old. Ethan brought her to a neutral location, a park near my house, for a brief, somewhat awkward, but ultimately meaningful introduction. Holding that tiny, innocent person, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Love, certainly, but also determination that she would grow up seeing her aunt as a whole person with valid needs and boundaries, not just a resource to be exploited. "She has your eyes," Ethan remarked as I cradled Willow. "Poor kid," I joked, and we shared a genuine laugh. Perhaps the first step toward a new kind of relationship. The most profound changes, however, came in my personal growth and the strengthening of my chosen family. The friends who had supported me through the crisis became even more important in my life. Sarah, David, and I started a tradition of Sunday brunches at my house, often joined by other friends who needed community and support. "You know, your house has become the gathering place for all of us," David observed during one such brunch. Ironic, considering everything that happened. "Maybe that's part of why it happened," Sarah suggested thoughtfully. "This house was always meant to be filled with love and laughter, just not in the way your parents envisioned." She was right. My home had become a hub for a family we had created ourselves. People who chose to be in each other's lives, who respected each other's boundaries, who celebrated each other's successes without jealousy or conditions. About 4 months after the moving truck incident, I met Daniel at a charity event hosted by my company. He was a graphic designer whose work I had admired from afar for years. Our connection was immediate and easy. Lacking the drama I had come to associate with relationships after watching my family dynamics for so long. When I eventually told him about what had happened with my family, I was nervous about his reaction. Would he think I was overreacting? Would he see it as a red flag that I had such complicated family relationships? "They tried to move you out of your own house," he repeated, his eyes wide with disbelief, and then got upset when you objected. That's insane, Chloe. You absolutely did the right thing." His unhesitating support was refreshing and healing. As our relationship developed, I appreciated how he respected my boundaries, never pushed for family reconciliation before I was ready, and understood when certain topics or situations triggered old wounds. "Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect," he told me once after I thanked him for his patience with my family issues. "It's not complicated. Through therapy, supportive relationships, and honest self-reflection, I gradually came to understand that what had happened with my family wasn't just about a house or a moving truck. It was about a lifetime of patterns of Sophia's needs always coming first, of my achievements being diminished or exploited, of boundaries being ignored. The incident, painful as it was, had forced these patterns into the light where they could no longer be denied or rationalized away. It had been the catalyst for necessary change, for setting boundaries that should have been established long ago. Dr. Hayes helped me see that while I couldn't control my family's behavior or choices, I could control my response to them. I could choose to maintain my boundaries without guilt. I could decide what kind of relationship I wanted moving forward, if any. I could define family on my own terms. The most powerful realization in family therapy, she told me, is that as adults, we can choose the nature of our family relationships. We're no longer powerless children who must accept whatever treatment we're given. That realization was liberating. I wasn't obligated to maintain toxic relationships simply because of blood ties. I wasn't required to sacrifice my well-being on the altar of family harmony. I could love my family while still protecting myself from their harmful behaviors. Today, 6 months after the moving truck incident, my life looks very different than it did before. My relationships are healthier, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. My home is truly my sanctuary, filled with colors and objects that bring me joy. My career continues to flourish, fueled by the confidence that comes from standing up for yourself and discovering your own strength. My relationship with my birth family is still evolving. There have been tentative steps toward reconciliation, primarily through Ethan and baby Willow. My parents and I exchange occasional text messages, more civil than warm, but no longer hostile. Sophia and I remain distant, though I hold hope that time and maturity might eventually heal that particular wound. What I've learned through this journey is that true family, whether related by blood or by choice, supports your growth rather than stifling it, celebrates your achievements rather than exploiting them, and respects your boundaries rather than trampling them. I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for genuine relationships built on mutual respect. Most importantly, I've learned that home isn't just a physical space with your name on the deed. It's a place where you are valued, respected, and free to be your authentic self. My house is still mine, but now it's truly a home in every sense of the word. So, if you're watching this and struggling with family boundaries, know that you're not alone. Know that it's okay to protect yourself, to set limits, to expect respect. Know that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary growth. And know that family, real family, should lift you up, not tear you down. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth. Leave a comment below and tell me, what was the toughest boundary you ever had to set with family? Your experience might just be the light someone else needs right now. Remember, we're all in this journey together. And by sharing our stories, we help each other find the courage to write new chapters. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.